The sponsor for today's podcast is SITA Eco-Mission. Eco-Mission is a tool that simplifies compliance, cuts cost, and offers real-time insights to support sustainable operation at airlines. SITA Eco-Mission helps airlines handle regulations like Refuel EU, CORSIA, and EU ETS, making compliance easier while supporting better, greener choices. Learn more in the link in the show notes.
And maybe one day we will start having the conversation around, is it better to consume more fuel and CO2 not to create a contrail? How do you weight the impact of a contrail versus the CO2 emission you might generate to avoid it? So ultimately, it's going to be one and only one conversation, the contrails versus the speed versus the altitude versus lateral optimization versus fuel consumption, because that's it's nearly like a 5D model that we need to put in place here.
Welcome to Sustainability in the Air, the world's first podcast dedicated to sustainable aviation. I'm your host, Shashank Nigam, the CEO of Simplifying. Every Thursday, I have important conversations with top aviation executives, technology entrepreneurs, and policymakers helping aviation take climate action. Conversations that help separate the signal from the noise. Whether you are a frequent flyer or an airline executive, if you care about sustainability or simply love traveling, welcome aboard. My guest today is Jan Cabaret. Jan is the CEO for SITA for aircraft. While a lot of you might know SITA for being a large IT company enabling airlines and airports to serve customers all over the world, what's interesting that Jan and I talk about is the SITA Eco-Mission. SITA's Eco-Mission is a strategic data-driven solution that empowers airlines to navigate carbon emission regulations like the Refuel EU and CORSIA while optimizing compliance costs. It's a very interesting mix of both the yin and the yang. It supports airlines in transitioning to greener operations without compromising profitability. Now that sounds like a win-win, right? That's exactly what Jan and I dive deep into. I hope you enjoy this episode. Jan, it's great to be finally speaking. Can you tell us a little about your role at SITA?
So I am the CEO of SITA for aircraft, which is the aircraft business unit of the SITA group. So I'm managing really a part of the SITA group, one of the four business units. The four being aircraft, airport, communication, and borders. So that's really the world according to SITA.
Okay, and you're focused on the aircraft.
Correct. So everything that relates to aircraft, the flight, the communication related to weather, related to fuel. So that is really the domain, right? So let's say when the wheels leave ground, that's pretty much where we are.
Okay, so wheels up until wheels down is where you're focused on. Now,
correct. Well, now we can discuss about taxi and so on. That might be the future as well, right? But that's as a simple view, that'd be that one.
Okay, we push back. Let's just say push back to landing is where you're looking at.
Yeah.
Okay. You have recently launched at SITA the new Eco-Mission sustainability program. What is this platform about? What are the goals that you're looking to accomplish with it?
Sure. So the product is called SITA Eco-Mission, and it's really a platform that is here to manage environmental responsibilities for airlines, while at the same time managing the financial reality of the environmental constraints that are being put on the airlines. So the key goal is to simplify the compliance with carbon reduction regulation, typically things like CORSIA, Refuel EU, so simplifying compliance and optimizing the cost. because I think what is important to see is that for airlines, there's a new challenge that is coming with environmental compliancy, and it involves collaboration between many different departments, between flight operations, compliance, and even finance, fuel managers. And this is where we've tried to be unique in here, which is how do we integrate all these teams and provide them a way to work together. Now, if I put it simply, there's really three items in there. One is a dashboard, which is for every flight in real time, looking to what are the applicable regulations to a given flight and emissions limits and reporting requirements. So that's the dashboard. There is everything that relates to the planning, so fleet planning, flight planning, to be able to anticipate, calculate costs of carbon reduction regulation. And there is the automated reporting, which is every airline who flies under CORSIA, under RefuelEU, will have to do reporting on a yearly basis. So how do we make sure that this is possible? So that's really how the platform is going to help airline to drive regulatory compliance. And the idea is that by driving compliance, well, we are basically supporting the airline towards going to save emissions and the net zero 2050 commitment. So that's now in a few words what the platform is about.
You mentioned you have been trialing this with a few airlines. Are you able to share early results of what's been achieved?
Sure. Well, so the system was actually developed with airlines because a number of airlines and also in particular the AACO, the Association of Arab Carriers, went to SITA and shared their constraints and their worries about the new regulation coming up. So not necessarily to say that obviously they don't want to be compliant. There's obviously a willingness of the whole industry to be compliant. Now, the complexity of compliance that involves the type of aircraft, the type of flights, the routes you're flying, whether you have available sustainable aviation fuel or not. I mean, the complexity that is inherent to those regulations is quite scary for airlines. And there is really an idea of how can you, SITA, help us solve that problem? So that's really how that came to us. And we've jointly developed that solution with three airlines who are members of AACO. And so the benefits in there have been really to be able to show the cost of compliancy, to actually prepare the reporting that is going to impact airlines. So airlines are quite excited, the ones that participated and to the trial, and obviously that is motivating us to bring this to market.
This is really good to know, and I'm even more curious now. What specific sustainability metrics or KPIs does the platform track and report on?
Sure, and in a way, it's a complex problem. And it's relatively simple to understand. One key KPI is the CO2 emissions. As part of regulation, airlines will need to track emissions per flight, per route, and for the entire fleet. So CO2 emissions is one. The other one is the fuel consumption. So how do we monitor fuel efficiency? How do we provide optimization insights to airlines? So that's the generic fuel. And there's also, in particular, everything that relates to sustainable aviation fuel. How do an airline tracks SAF and the blending rates and the usage of SAF? And the last metric would be the carbon credit. Obviously, airlines will know how do you monitor the purchase of carbon credits, the usage of those credits, and the pricing. So that's really the KPIs: CO2 emissions, fuel consumption, SAF usage, and carbon credits. And obviously there's these are the non-financial metrics, but obviously we also can go into cost-related KPIs with carbon credit expenditures, SAF pricing, and the potential saving on fuel optimization. So the idea is really to go beyond compliance into providing data for airlines to make data-driven decisions.
It's very interesting. It seems that for most of the decisions, the cost goes down and the carbon emissions go down, and they're directly correlated. Are there any metrics where costs go up while trying to get the emissions down?
Yes, meaning there is obviously a reflection that an airline needs to have in terms of where will it put the cursor in terms of its objective on sustainability. Obviously, today the price of SAF is much higher than the price of regular fuel. So the typically the blending that an airline would choose to bring might actually bring the cost up, while obviously bringing the environmental impact to decrease it. So that's that dynamic might exist as well.
Yeah, got it. And because it's in flight, are you looking at things beyond just the operations like contrails? And is that part of or non CO2 emissions, basically? Is that part of the remit as well?
So it is not yet part of the remit of eco-mission, which is more, again, related to compliance to regulation. And today, the regulation that is being brought together is really around CO2 emissions. Now, clearly, in the whole world of aviation, there is a domain around non-CO2 emissions, being contrails or even being around noise, right? So there will be products and models that will come in the coming years, right? Where we will be able to potentially provide recommendations to avoid the creation of the bad contrails, and also provide different trajectories to go against noise. So meaning that will come. It's not yet in a commission, but it's a flight optimization domain, non-CO2.
It's fantastic, and glad to see the initial focus that you're doing. One of the key things I wanted to get more information on is sustainable aviation fuel. I believe it can help airlines tackle the mandates and reporting. How do you do that?
So obviously today, the platform will be able to load data, so ingest data, and that is related to the availability of SAF in different airports and the price of SAF in from the different suppliers. So the platform, by actually loading that data and also being loaded with the real flights that are flown, and the loading of post-flight data in terms of fuel consumption and time of flight, it will then provide visibility insights on the total consumption, the type, the cost related to SAF, the cost related to non-SAF, as well as the cost related to carbon credits. So in a way, what is interesting is that it might also help airline to optimize their procurement strategy, their fuel procurement strategy. So ultimately going much beyond just a reporting platform.
Do you foresee that this can then go on to become a procurement platform as well for SAF for across like a book and claim or actual pumping of SAF in physical planes?
Could I see it? Yes, I think it's quite a few steps away. I think what and I'm not even talking about a commission here, but I think the whole concept of carbon credits and the availability and the trading of carbon credits today is a concept which is being discussed, which is being mentioned in multiple forums. Now, it doesn't really exist in reality, so that might actually be another thing that ultimately pops up into that industry, because now it's good to have concept, but somebody has to animate that marketplace,
Right, to
that
actually do
trading.
it. Yeah, to stimulate
Correct.
it.
Exactly.
Right. Now, tell me, is EcoMission a new system that airlines have to integrate? Or how do you work with airlines' existing systems and data sources? Because some airlines are already monitoring this, let's say using a system called Cirium.
Correct. And so in a way, obviously the airlines already have data across multiple systems. And so is it a new system? Yes. And that's a system which is going to be fed by data sources that the airlines usually have already, right? So I mean, now obviously, when you're an airline, you actually get data from multiple systems, especially when you start talking about flight data, post-flight data, fuel data. So the idea is, how do we use technology to sanitize that data and load it into a platform without this to be a meta integration project for the airline. So it is really designed as a SaaS platform that is fed from data that the airlines usually have, and we're trying to integrate as much, to put as less constraints on the format so that it doesn't become a pain for the airline. So that's also part of the value proposition.
It's very interesting that you're looking at data integration in that manner as well. Can you explain? AI is a huge thing. Is there any AI integrated, or what role does AI or machine learning play in the EcoVision platform?
So there is AI, and I'm obviously when we all mention that these days, we're trying to avoid using that as a buzzword, right? So we are leveraging AI ML because the platform can analyze vast amounts of flight, of emission, and financial data. And from this, we're able to identify optimization strategies based on airline priorities. And that is actually back to the question you were raising before, which is, are there scenarios where cost could go high and reduction could go down? Well, that's the type of scenarios that the airlines will be able to play with in the platform. So reducing emissions or cutting costs, or a balance of both. And AI ML is actually used to provide predictive analytics and optimization of the scenarios. And I think what is interesting is to identify patterns in fuel consumption, in carbon emission, and cross correlate that with operational data to ultimately help optimize routes and the utilization of SAF. So
It's very,
that's
very, very interesting. Are you then combining all of these insights across airlines, or does each airline only get insights from its own data?
no. So in that case, that's really insights from its own data, and in particular when we start modeling aircraft performance. So meaning we are at a point where we do not model aircraft types, we model aircraft tails. So a specific aircraft performance is data that we use. And obviously you need to use the actual network of a given airline to provide relevant data. So that's where actually cross-correlating data from other airlines provide less value.
Very interesting. So, are there plans in the future to aggregate this data either across aircraft types, let's say all the A320s or all the 737s in an airline fleet, or even share this with other airlines who may be operating a similar type of aircraft?
Actually, I would actually say that we're not, at least at SITA, going into that direction, because what experience is showing is that the individual performance of a given tail is very different from its neighbor. So if you take an airline X that is operating an A320 or a fleet of A320s, two A320s of that given fleet, even if they have the same engine, more or less the same age, have very different performance because their maintenance cycle have been different, because they have flown into different conditions. So I think at least in SITA, the future is really around tail specific modeling, because the generic models are better than nothing, but the tail specific models are where we bring a lot of value in terms of being able to predict the fuel consumption, the fuel flow of a given aircraft.
Very interesting. I'm learning new things as well. I would have thought that a same plane would behave this in a similar manner across airlines, even. But you're right. Based on the mission types it has done, or the age, or the maintenance records, things can change.
Exactly.
Right. Uh, are you able to share, given that you're focused on only individual airlines, then what sort of customization is the platform able to meet? You know, to meet the needs of different airlines and regulatory environments in different regions.
Sure. I think to answer that question, I think it's very important to understand that the regulatory requirements are quite in their infancy. They are quite fluid, and I'm not saying that negatively. That's the reality. As people, countries realize the sustainability challenge that the world is facing. Now we see regulation arriving in different parts of the world. So the platform has to be able to actually be customizable with the regulatory requirements that apply to the shape of their network, i.e. their flight network. So typically today, well, if an airline flies to Europe, then obviously Refuel EU will apply. But no, potentially in 2 years from now, you may have a similar scheme when flying to some parts of Africa, for example. So the ability to customize regulation versus shape of the network and to regularly update that is what we've built into the system. Yeah, and that's really, how do you scale the platform versus the evolution of sustainability initiatives around the world?
Right, I hear you. Operational efficiencies is one of the few levers airlines can pull today to become more sustainable. It's not SAF will limit its supply. It's not hydrogen or electric aircraft, which is way out in the future. Operational efficiencies they can do today. Are you able to discuss any early adopters or case studies of airlines using e-commissions and what results they have seen?
Sure. So I think what's important is that a commission in itself doesn't lead to emission savings, right? I mean, it is a way to stand next to the airlines and help them be compliant with the regulation, which ultimately leads to the reduction of emission. We also have other options which we can discuss, obviously, where we are into decreasing fuel emissions and then decreasing emissions. If we stay on a commission, there is obviously a cost of compliance when airlines need to employ staff and systems to be able to provide reporting to the authorities to demonstrate that they are following compliance and regulation. This is where the platform helps. And today, what we've looked into the early results is we're reducing by 3% the cost of compliance, and we're reducing by 30% the staff requirement across department to be able to be compliant to the regulation. So that's the kind of metrics that we have. So really around how do we reduce the workload on the airline to manage their compliance.
Got it. So this is very much compliance driven. Given that the compliance regulations are the strongest in EU, is that the core target market ultimately of this program, or are you looking at this for global implementation?
No, so we are clearly looking for global implementation because even if some of the early regulations are coming for the flights to and from Europe. I mean, first of all, we have global airlines flying to and from Europe, wherever they are in the world, and because the aviation industry has that objective by 2050, regulation will come across the world. So I mean, for us, that idea of equipping airlines and assisting airlines in their path to compliancy and as a consequence their path to reduction of emission, that's a global challenge for all of us.
I hear you. A global challenge for all of us, indeed. How does e-commission fit in SITA's broader sustainability strategy? I mean, you mentioned aircraft only, but then there's airports and the other sectors you mentioned. How does it all fit in?
Sure, and that's what I was referring to before. I mean, in a way, a commission in itself doesn't reduce emissions, but obviously we have other solutions, and you were mentioning operational efficiency as being the one thing that the aviation industry can do right now to reduce emissions, and I 100% subscribe to this. SAF development is going to be a great help. New engines are going to be of a great help, and different alternative sources of energy. Now, what we can do right now, what the industry can do right now, is to better operate and reduce emissions. And typically, we have another solution called SITA OptiFlight, which is analyzing aircraft-specific data, those single tail performance data, cross-referencing it with aircraft data, flight plan data, weather data, and providing recommendations to pilot on how typically they can change their climb profile to save climb fuel. And we're really going into very interesting results. And typically, the number I can share with you is about 5% savings on climb out fuel, which
Wow.
is ultimately a very significant impact, because climb is naturally when the aircraft consume the most fuel.
It's very interesting. That is correct. In terms of throttle, in terms of climb, where you're climbing, the direction you're taking. So, going back to an earlier discussion we had, if we look at non CO2 or contrails, would that then in the future become part of what you're doing, or would that be part of OptiFlight?
So it would probably, at some point, that's a product strategy conversation. But no, I definitely see that as part of OptiFlight. The reason being that, we may in the coming years, when the data models around the contrails and their impact on global warming have not been fully understood. I'm not saying they've not yet been understood, but there's a lot of work still happening on contrails. And maybe one day we will start having the conversation around, is it better to consume more fuel and CO2 not to create a contrail? How do you weight the impact of a contrail versus the CO2 emission you might generate to avoid it? So ultimately, it's going to be one and only one conversation: the contrails versus the speed versus the altitude versus lateral optimization versus fuel consumption, because that's it's nearly like a 5D model that we need to put in place here. So that's going to be the same topic.
It's very interesting, talking about this from a product strategy perspective, not just a market perspective, right? Because it's ultimately all an ecosystem. What sort of future enhancements or features are planned for the eco-mission platform itself?
So on eco-mission, now you were asking the point around, are we using AI for eco-mission? So we are today, but obviously as we master that technology more and more, the ability to create advanced planning, so scenario simulation, cost impact of new destinations or aircraft types, we could provide a tool for the airlines to not only measure what they do today, but also potentially create model the impact of new routes that they are thinking about, of new aircraft that they might be thinking about as well. So we could go into where we provide support to airlines on fleet expansion and route planning, right? And also another item that might come, and we quickly touched base on that before, which is how do we manage offsets and carbon credits inventory, meaning the tracking, the management of carbon credits, the offset obligations. That's certainly something that is that will need technology so that the airlines are able to manage that in an efficient manner.
Very, very interesting. I'm curious to see how all this unfolds and the AI gets integrated. We just spoke about OptiClimb. I just wanted to come back about it. OptiClimb was recently adopted by KLM City Hopper across their fleet. What makes that unique in its approach in reducing overall emissions? And do you foresee OptiClimb and eco-mission working together to sort of round up that conversation that we just had?
Well, to me, the two products ultimately work on the same topic, the topic of sustainability. Now they serve different purposes. I think going back to KLM City Hopper, I think what OptiClimb brings is really that tail specific philosophy, and now we touched. Now we covered that before, and I have to admit that even our teams were surprised to see the difference in performance between different tails, right? So the accurate understanding of aircraft performance state, for me, that's really what is the key. What I think is interesting for KLM as well is there's no additional device or application that is needed, right? So there's no aircraft retrofit. There's nothing to install in the cabin. Ultimately, we can provide the flight optimization recommendation and integrate that into the EFB of an airline, right? So there's nothing complicated. And maybe the last thing I would insist upon is, because we believe in tail-specific performance, we basically load aircraft performance data for each and every tail all the time. So the models are constantly being recalculated, so that at any moment in time, we know what is the current performance of an aircraft. Right. And obviously what's coming next is the optimization of altitude during flight, right? So when we've optimized the climb, make sure that we optimize cruise phase, either vertical optimization or horizontal optimization, and descent as well as we go.
I think this is why it will be quite interesting to see in the future when you integrate things like, contrail avoidance data, because your optic climb might be saying for the best fuel efficiency, you should be at this level. And then the contrail data might be saying, oh, but you should be, 10,000 feet lower to avoid some contrails or even turbulence. Correct. For that matter. But that increases fuel burn. And now the pilot needs to decide, or the system needs to recommend to the pilot, what do you do?
Exactly. And I think that is exactly, I know it's not just Opti for us, but to me, that's the philosophy of what we try to do in SITA, because the world becomes more and more complex. So how, if you're a pilot, you're in the cockpit, you have to safely fly your passengers, meaning you can't add constraints and new parameters all the time, being contrails, being CO2, being SAF, being variation of airspace, of weather turbulence, and so on. So to make the job manageable, we need to provide the right tools to pilots, to dispatchers, and even as an extension to controllers. And that is the philosophy that we're trying to do, which is using technology to provide the right decision-making tools, because otherwise the mission becomes too difficult when the number of constraints becomes too large.
I hear you. It's not easy. Zooming out of the tools, how is SITA collaborating with industry partners and organizations to further develop and promote solutions that make aviation more sustainable?
Well, I think what's interesting is SITA is a 75 years old company, and it's not so often that you see companies of that age, and I think to me that shows how much SITA has been able to evolve with the airlines and with the airport over time. So SITA is actually owned by the industry. The airlines are our shareholders, and we also work with different industry partners and organizations, typically the Arab Air Carriers Organization, and through workshop and dialogue. And the commission is, to me, one of the best example ever. Is we identify an industry challenge, and we are being engaged by the industry to think about potential technical and operational solution that will help the industry solve those challenges. And that's exactly what SITA's DNA is about. Our dream is to be the body that is being called when the industry has a problem. All right, so that specific phone behind the glass that you break and then you call SITA.
Fantastic. Final question: what gives you the most hope about the future of sustainable aviation?
There's a lot in there, and there's really multiple technology that are being put in place that will converge at some point. So, what makes me hope? Well, I can see what we do on operational efficiency. I can see the investment being made around SAF. I can see the investment being made around new engines, new aircraft types, and I can see as well the change that will come around air traffic management and how do we manage airspace overall, and I think this gives me a lot of hope. And I think the other thing I will see is the new talents that we bring into aviation. Now we see young people, data scientists that believe in aviation, that believe it is possible, to make aviation greener, to meet our commitments by 2050. So when I see 20 years old, people knocking at our door and joining our teams. Well, that gives me a lot of hope because I can see the talents coming.
Fantastic. Let's keep attracting the right talent to the right solutions. And thank you for doing what you can, because operational efficiency is something that can help reduce the climate impact today. We don't actually have to wait. Jan, the final part of this interview is called the rapid fire round, in which we get to know you a bit more personally. So we'll start with something simple. What's your favorite book?
So my favorite book actually would be any book from Arturo Pérez Reverte, because I find it incredible, the diversity of topics, and any book from him is wonderful. So I mean I would struggle to pick one out of those. So that's why if you allow me, I'll pick the author.
Okay, fair enough. And I know it's going to be dicey to ask you for your favorite airline. So how about your favorite airport?
I can do favorite airline if you.
Okay, what's your favorite airline?
Because I think my favorite airline is the one that brings me home for the weekend. You know? So when I'm traveling and it's Friday and I want to spend time back with my family, then any of those airlines I love, and I mean that seriously.
Okay, fair enough. What's your favorite airport?
Favorite airport? That's a good one. I actually very much like Dubai Airport, and
Okay.
just because that's where, and actually it's probably even an advertisement from them, but it's where the world meets, and I really feel that's quite true.
Yeah, that is indeed true. I've seen people in Dubai airport buying everything from fine perfumes and laptops to detergent, which was quite interesting. Your favorite movie?
So here I'll pick a movie then, just because of the reaction that my son had when I saw it with him, which is Top Gun.
Oh, yes. Maverick or the old one?
Oh, the old one.
The original.
Now he prefers the second one, but I know I still like the first one. But yeah, I just loved seeing that movie with him. So that's
Yeah.
so I'll keep that one.
Indeed. Your favorite city?
Favorite city, Montreal.
Montreal.
There's something. Yeah, there's something in there. I really like
Yes.
being there.
It's very special indeed, quite charming. What is something you'd like to learn?
Ooh, well, I'll answer on what I'm learning right now, which is somehow the topic of that conversation today, which is, no, what is it that technology allows to do on decarbonization? How much will technology be able to help us versus changing our habits overall, right? Because and up to where can we go, and how do we drive change on our habits? And I think that is really super interesting. And the contrails topic is another good example, right? Which is, how do you link all those parameters to reduce impact?
Absolutely. I think technology has a role to play, but I think changing our own behavior should not be discounted. It has an impact. It has an impact today, and just, conscious travel consciously thinking about our travel is a bit more important, and can have an impact today rather than waiting for a technology to come and rescue us many years later. What is something that you do in your free time?
So I run, I bike, I walk. And actually, there's no such thing as free time for me. I mean, there's never a time where I do nothing. I would have to be pretty sick and for doing nothing. So yeah, no, I'll be outside all the time.
Okay, you're outside. You're out and about, outdoors person.
Yeah,
I can feel it. Finally, what is the best advice you've received?
So this I will actually pick another movie, which is Gattaca. And there's a moment in the movie which has marked me forever, when one of the characters is wondering how his brother is actually able to achieve so much, and he asks him, why? How can you achieve that? And the answer was, because I never saved anything for the way back, and that's to me that to me is really a way of living, which is, when I go into something, I'll go 100%.
All in. You're all in.
Exactly. I won't think about keeping energy for the way back, and so
Okay.
that has marked me quite a lot.
Go all in. All right.
Yeah, exactly. Or don't.
Or don't, or just don't do it. Yeah, the best advice on this I've heard is from one of my favorite authors. His name is Derek Sivers, and he wrote a book called. The book is called Hell Yeah or No. So
That's it.
for every decision, it's a hell yeah or it's a no. Fantastic.
I like that one.
Yeah, thank you very much. Truly enjoyed this conversation, and I wish you all the best. Thank you for bringing EcoMission and making it a reality.
Yeah, thank you, Shashank. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Sustainability in the Air. Aviation is one of the hardest to decarbonize industries, yet there are multiple paths to get to net zero. Awareness is key to a green future. So please give us your support to help our sustainable aviation insights reach a wider audience. You can do this by sharing this episode on your network, on LinkedIn, Twitter, or even WhatsApp. Or perhaps you might consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to this episode. You can start a conversation with us by writing to us at podcast@simpliflying, that's simply with an i.com. And for more content on sustainable aviation, please visit our website green.simpliflying.com and join the movement. Sustainability in the Air is an original podcast by Simpliflying. The show is produced by Juraj Toth in Slovakia. Dirk Singer is our Director of Sustainability, who leads research for each interviewee out of Greenwich, UK. Shubhadeep Pal is our supervising editor based out of Mumbai and Singapore. The articles are written by Ayushi Badola in Dehradun in India and Meera Hull in Montreal, Quebec. Creative design is led by Ligia Esteve in Montreal. Baiba Drimen is the project director for the show based out of Valencia, Spain. Special thanks to Wendy Sim in Singapore. And I'm Shashank Nigam, the CEO of Simpliflying and your host. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.